Hello, everybody. Welcome to ConTech Exec. I'm your host, Robert Zimmerman, and I have special guest with me today, Alex Issakova. All the way, it's late for you, I know. Thank you for being with me. I get it, on the other side of the pond, as they say. But I really think this is going to be a good episode to talk a little bit about the blind spots that maybe we're not seeing in AI. And Alex, I just want to kind of give you the stage, give me a little bit of background on, how you got into this and where you're coming from on AI. I just want everybody to know what you're doing.
Yeah, hi, and thanks for having me here. So my background is kind of 15 years of working in Silicon Valley in AI tech, mostly in advertising. Um, and yeah, I've recently left that, and now I'm kind of figuring out what I'm doing, and my angle has really been ethical AI, and I write a lot about that. And yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so I'd subscribe to your Substack. You've got a Substack.
Yes, please. It's called The Long Signal. And I write about all the things that we don't talk about with AI, kind of all the edge cases and like maybe where it fails. And I don't want to be too kind of doomsday on it, but I do think it's really important that we understand like where we shouldn't be using it and where kind of the limits of AI are.
Right. And so, yeah, that kind of brings me to my point. So we do a lot of talk on the, ConTech Exec, ConTech, obviously construction technology, not necessarily exactly related to, but when I call it the age of AI coming into existence, I do a lot of talking about, hey, do you really need it? And what can it do for you? What can't it do for you? Those types of things. So it kind of all starts out with this idea of, AI kind of falls apart for anybody that tries to use it if it doesn't have good data to start with, right? You were kind of talking earlier about, when you first got started, say 15 years ago or whatever, when people were talking to you about this product and they were saying, well, do this, and then it won't do that. I mean, it truly is a structured system that needs to have, good data just to even get off the ground, right?
I mean, yeah, it's a prediction machine that learns from the data. So if you are using AI in your business and and your data is not structured or it's kind of all around and it's not neatly structured, that's going to be an issue, right? Because it learns from all of the data. And same with all of the LLMs that we're using, like ChatGPTs or Claudes or whatever you prefer. The reason they're called large language models is because they trained on a huge amount of data. And generally, what that means, and I think this is really important, and definitely I didn't realize until recently, is they're trained on everything in the internet, and that includes like YouTube videos, Reddit posts, LinkedIn posts, like you name it. So it could be,
Yeah, could be.
it's not high quality data necessarily. So when you take advice from ChatGPT and it's telling you, do this or do that, that could be like a 20-year-old kid who made a YouTube video and is just regurgitating that with authority because it sounds confident, but it's not necessarily just because something sounds confident doesn't mean it is right.
Correct. Yes. Yes. A lot of times that can be mistaken, right? It sounds really good until it's, till the delivery. And then all of a sudden you realize, hey, I've made a mistake here. But I guess, and so that kind of leads me to that next point of we got to stop treating it like it's some sort of reasoning agent. It doesn't really reason, does it?
What do you mean by reason?
It doesn't, kind of like about critical thinking, or the way a human looks at a situation that says, okay, I've got this situation here, situation A, B, and C, and my best path would be here, here, and here, through those obstacles. That's kind of reasoning. It thinks its way through a problem. It doesn't look at it as a surface level. There's one problem here I have to solve. Most of the times you're peeling back the onion on a problem, right? And there's not just one problem. There's another one after that. And there's just a little nuance, there's little nuances in everything you're
There's
trying to get through.
context, there's some maybe
Yes.
an ethical thing that you're considering. It doesn't see any of that. Really, yeah, in that sense, it definitely doesn't reason. I just wrote a piece about Anthropic published a study, which I think is really interesting about I think they called it like agentic misalignment. Really, what it means is they built an agent, and they asked the agent the task was basically to review emails for this like fictional company with a fictional CEO. And in the emails, the agent realized, the AI agent, right, the robot, that they were going to shut it down at 5 o'clock that day. And there was like no conversation, nothing to do. And there was no ethical way for the AI agent to kind of appeal and make its case to stay alive. And they wanted to see what the agent would do. And what it did in that instance is, so they tested all the different LLMs like Claude, ChatGPT, Grok, etc. 80% of them went to blackmail the CEO, because also what they did in the emails, and this is all obviously fictional, is the CEO was having an affair. This fictional CEO was having a fictional affair. So it gave the LLM a reason to blackmail the CEO, which it did in most of the cases. In one of the cases, it even sent an email to the CEO's wife, kind of revealing the affair, hoping that then that argument, I guess, would mean that it wouldn't be shut down, right? And it's kind of it's funny. There's also like a slight they ran a slightly different experiment where the CEO, this fictional CEO, is stuck in a server room with like toxic fumes, and the agent can either turn off the alarm and kill the CEO, or keep the alarm going and save the CEO. And it chooses to turn off the alarm, kill the CEO, the fictional CEO, right? And keep itself alive.
That's disturbing on
It
many
is
levels.
disturbing, and you think like Terminator and like all of your like worst kind of AI fears. But what I found really interesting is when I posted it, it got a ton of discussion from people and from the AI community on my post. And there was so many people saying it's not that AI is evil, it's not choosing kind of to be evil and like murder people and blackmail them. It's because it doesn't understand what it's doing, right? And I think that distinction is really important. Like for me, it doesn't ethically, it doesn't matter whether you meant to do harm or you did harm, right? Like if harm was done, harm was done. But there's different schools of thoughts in it. Um, but I think for this thing, it doesn't understand that it killed the CEO, that it killed a human being, even though it was programmed into it not to harm humans, etc. But that's the whole thing, is it doesn't understand context. So it can create kind of solutions and do things that we don't want it to do if it's not being supervised very, very closely.
So it kind of skips me to this idea that, yeah, I think you and I talked about it when we first had a chat, was, you know, and I had thought about this before, but learning from humans is not great, right? If we're expecting a different outcome for some reason, humans do all that kind of stuff too. Humans blackmail other humans. I mean, at different levels, right? We're manipulative. I'm not saying we're bad people, but I'm just saying we do this. We often do the CYA thing that, maybe it's a white lie, or maybe it's, clocking out 15 minutes a little late, but saying you showed up, right on time. Just little stuff, right? But when you start to think that there's this rules-based system that is now analyzing our behavior and then kind of regurgitating it back to us like, well, what would you do in this situation? Well, obviously, it's going to do exactly probably what a human might
Yeah,
do.
I
And
think
is
you're
that
exactly right, right? Like it's learned from humans, and we're far from perfect in how we behave. And because it's learned from vast amounts of the internet and like not really, even if it was like, I think there's a lot of books that have also been uploaded, and there's a whole other thing with like
oh yeah.
the copyright issues. But even if you read like literature, there's characters who behave unethically, right? So,
Yeah.
and we're just giving it all of that. So that's just one of those things. And I'm not saying that we should only give it like, oh, this is, you know, like a very kind of controlled information, because you can't, like, it needs huge amounts of data to learn from. But yeah, it learns from us and we are not perfect. So it
Right.
behaves how we behave.
Right. So and again, I think about the large language models like the Chat GPTs of the world, Perplexities, Claude, whatever. You've got these systems; they're learning from all of this large data sector. But if in a business situation, in a business outcome, like this is the kind of thing that I look at, you know, should businesses, be very, very clear about, hey, we only want you to think about these things for our specific purpose, so that it has some level of control and has some sort of level of ethical, um, operation.
Yeah, um, absolutely. I mean, there's so many different ways you could take it. There's small language models, right, that train on kind of much smaller material. I think that's one way to go. And you just give it that information, say, learn from this. This is how I want you to behave. I think those need probably, I haven't worked with them a ton, so I don't really know. I imagine they need like a bit more monitoring, and you just need to make sure that they are actually as smart as the large language models.
Well,
There's
so when you say as smart, is the reason that as smart thing comes up is because it has a lot of data to kind of sort through, and then has more points of reference, meaning it's like, hey, we've got more points of reference, so we can make a better decision with more points of reference.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like if you're working on something like a biochemical thing, maybe you don't need a large language model, right? Like maybe you need a small language model that's just trained on really high quality biochemistry materials. And that might be much better for you than a large language model, right? A different thing could be um, LLM is not always the solution, right? I think in 2025, we conflate AI with ChatGPT just because it is so incredibly popular. But that's not the only AI tool, right? There's different methods like Google's DeepMind, which I think now they're probably working on Gemini mostly and kind of gone down the LLM route as well. But some of their work that they've done has been kind of very different, either like deep neural networks and machine learning models. And they've worked on a bunch of scientific discoveries, right? So there's different techniques
Hmm.
for different problems. LLM is not the solution for every single problem.
Well, and so is that, are you kind of lead me into this next idea is like, are LLMs are they a dead end? Can they really scale to real intelligence? Can they get there?
Love this question. I don't know. I mean, obviously there's, and I don't know if you listeners know, Jan LeCun, who is still Meta's chief AI officer. He's
But
just,
he's moving,
yeah,
right?
he's leaving.
Yeah.
And he's leaving because he doesn't believe LLMs are the answer. So what he's proposing, and that's by no means kind of the only solution, is he's calling it world models, and it's models that kind of understand context and wider things and bigger things. I was talking to someone earlier today who also has a startup, who's a software engineer as well with a technical background. I don't think so. He's called his models kind of systems to thinking. If you've read, Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, there's like
Yes.
two types of thinking that humans have, right? Like systems one thinking is like the quick one, the heuristics, we jump to conclusions. We need that type of thinking, right? Because systems two thinking is when we analyze the nuance, understand the context, but it takes a lot more energy. Not every problem needs a systems two thinking.
Right. That
Um,
systems one thinking, just for those folks. Yeah, I compare it to more like, intuition and intertwined with how you were raised, kind of like situational. Like I need to make this decision now, whether it's good or bad. I gotta do this. This is my decision now.
Yeah.
Systems two type of thinking is, okay, I've got a moment. Let me take a step back and then we look at it, because I've got some time for output, right? And sometimes, and so, yeah, we worry about that a lot in construction.
Yeah, and some problems really need systems to thinking, but because they take so much energy, like we as humans will always, I think, will kind of, our brains will try and do everything for systems one. So we need to kind of consciously make those slow decisions and really think through um, the issues. But yeah, so basically, he's trying to build like a systems two thinking AI that also understands the context and the nuance and the model and kind of the world that it lives in, but in a different way to Yann Um, there's also something called causal AI. If we go slightly mathematical for a second, there's in probabilities like causation. No, correlation is not causation, right? If two things move kind of in the same direction, it doesn't mean that one causes the other. Like there's a famous stat where they have ice cream sales and violent crime, and they generally move kind of hand in hand. July, August, kind of the highest months, and then January in the northern hemisphere, the lowest months, right? And it's not that ice cream sales cause violent crime or the other way around, but criminals also like to do their business when the weather is nice. Um, so really there's a different, there's like a third factor that's causing both of those things. But if you just look at the graph, it would seem like ice cream sales and violent crime are correlated.
It's taking information and kind of layering it over one and it's just saying, well, this is the reason why. The causality is obviously here, even though they've got nothing in common.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if as a society we have, like, there's so many of these different types of AI. I think it's very we know, and I think this movement is growing, that maybe LLMs is not the solution to all of our problems, and maybe funding trillions and trillions of dollars into and putting it all on that bet is not the best thing to do. And I really don't want to stoke the fears of like the AI bubble bursting. But
Oh,
there
yes.
are
Well,
there are
did you
other
see the thing
types.
came out just now? I mean, literally just got the post on LinkedIn. It talks about Amazon's $50 billion investment into, AI.
No, I haven't seen it.
It just came out on LinkedIn. There's an article on LinkedIn, but I think it's interesting. Again, yeah, we don't want to get to the AI bubble because I think that's a large rabbit hole you can kind of go down into and get lost. But I do want to talk about cost.
Mm.
All right, and I'm talking real cost levels. Like executives they love an idea. Um, they love the idea of AI, but they really have no idea what it costs. And we're not talking just dollars here. We're talking about many layers. You've got your compute cost, which is what it's going to take you energy wise in order to get to the level that you want to go. We're talking about, data preparation and governance, those types of things that you got to get into, just the integration of it, those phases, internal training and adoption. And then, of course, if you're trying to train your own, you're going to have a model drift, your updates, you got all this kind of different things. And then, just a big one, organizational change. But then beyond that, just the economics of actually having AI out there in the world of just regular people and big data centers going in, and we need more energy and we need more water, the demand, right? I don't know. I mean, I think what is the real cost? And, when you're on the ethical side of things, I think it might be a bit too much.
I don't know if, as a society, we have a good idea of the actual cost of all of this. From, and it's something I'm kind of researching now, and I really would like to write about it. But honestly, I don't feel like I understand it well enough myself because it's just so complex. But I'll give you some examples that I've got. Is there's obviously water, right? And in order to cool the servers and the centers, we need huge amounts of water. It generally tends to be drinking water. So that's an issue. It's not just water that you can pump back into the system. There are many regions in the world where we are building data centers that are already experiencing drought. So I don't really, I mean, I know why we're building them there, just because the country's won investment, right, from big tech, and it's a great investment. But those data centers, apart from building them, they don't create a lot of jobs maintaining them, and then they just drain the resources from those communities. It doesn't seem like a great fair deal for those communities, and yeah, the numbers of the water are not really published very openly. I
And
have
I don't
heard,
think, and to your point on that, I don't necessarily know that the communities themselves get much say
I don't
in
think they,
it.
some of them do, the ones that are a little bit more clued in and have like good kind of third sector kind of advocacy groups that are fighting it. But if you don't, then yeah, they might not have a say.
Yeah, I mean, you see the data center going into, there's the big giant one, Stargate over here, just outside of, I think it's Abilene or whatever. You're already starting to see the posts of, people complaining. It's like, we really don't have much say whether this thing goes in or not. It's just going in. And yeah, it does add some jobs, and for a short period of time, I don't know how many jobs it adds. But again, I think it gets to that. Everybody sees the usefulness of an AI, right? We've already started to see, some usefulness of it. But then there's that darker side. Like I said, those blind spots that we're running into. It's like, are we making a deal with the devil here a little bit?
I don't know. I don't know. I would like to know, I use AI a lot in my day-to-day life. I want to know if, like, what is my energy cost of this, right? And should I, um, how does it relate to me, like flying or driving or eating meat? And then it becomes, at least it then becomes like an informed decision of what do I do? But right now, because we don't know, it's like we're in an impossible situation where we know there's a dark cost to them, but
I agree with you, and I think it's a fair point to say that because we don't have the data, we're in uncharted territory here
yeah,
a little bit, right? We don't necessarily have the data to say, yeah, it's going to create these kind of problems. We can predict with a fair amount of certainty that it's going to have effect on some people in a negative way. And we're going to have a prediction from the other side that's, the proponents of it are going to say, well, it's going to be much more positive than it is negative, which is what I see a lot of. I see a lot of the topic of, the questions that come up. What about the energy? What about the water? Well, the bonus side is, hey, guess what? We're going to have to improve our infrastructures, no matter if you're in, London or if you're in West Texas. We're going to have to improve these structures in order to be able to provide the kind of services that, AI would be able to, provide. So that's a good thing because, again, I know in just West Texas alone, United States, the infrastructure is not as good as it should be, or not as good as it, and again, I don't know much about over in London and in your neck of the woods, but I would say that it's probably not just a USA problem, right?
I think it is. It's the water, right? Like that, I think rings true for all communities, even like in the UK. I mean, it rains a lot here, right? We have a ton of water, but it's if you need drinking water to cool the servers. Like also, I was reading about, I think it was the UAE or Saudi Arabia just signed a huge deal with Nvidia to also build data centers. I'm like, how are they going to cool them there? Like it is so hot there in the summer.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Um,
they just built the is it TSCME or whatever. They built them out in Arizona. They built them in the desert, right?
there's
And
no water and it's so hot.
yeah, I can't say that there's no water for sure, but I just do know that it's super hot, And they built it right out there in the middle of. I guess if they're just building the chips there, they don't necessarily worry about it. But I would
That's different,
figure,
right? Yeah, the data
yeah.
center is the one that actually chip making, I think, is different.
But I would think there would have to be a testing facility that'd have to test these things out before they just, came off the shelf. But yeah, I don't know.
I think we're just so excited about this whole thing that everyone's just like more, 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 more.
Almost like a social contagion, right? It's
Like a bubble. Um, that's I don't want it to be a bubble. It makes me really uncomfortable.
yeah.
Um,
Um. Well, everybody compares it to. We get to the hype cycle, right? Where it's very, very, very high on the hype cycle. Everybody's kind of up here in the air about the whole thing, and then we may just be looking at that what upcoming kind of trough of disillusionment, right? It's not necessarily going to cover everything that you think it's supposed to cover right out of the gate, right? But beyond that trough of disillusionment is real growth,
yeah,
right? Which I can be okay with, because I believe you need that trough of disillusionment. You need to make those mistakes, right? You need to be wrong for a little bit. And so that way you can actually get a hold on what is the right direction for this. Because I think my biggest concern with this is we tend to get overwrought with our intention, right? And we get our blinders on and we stop thinking about some of the, like, again, ethical ramification, some of the, just the professional ramifications of it, like the workload. Are we really lowering the workload, or are we going to be increasing the workload on folks? Are we going to be replacing jobs that really we don't need to replace? Those types of things. Now, if you
yeah,
talk to, listening to Elon Musk, he would say we really have to focus on AI and robotics because um, of the race that we're in, where we don't necessarily have enough people to sustain, especially as people start to retire out, sustain our I guess standard of living, right? Not enough people to build the buildings, or service this, or service the data centers, or all those kind of things. And we absolutely have to have it in order to get to it. But then there's the other side of me that says, why can't we step back during this, say, trough of disillusionment, right? Why can't we step back and say, okay, there's a way, but it's just going to take a little longer, and maybe that's a good thing for it to take a little longer.
yeah, I agree with you. I think as humanity, we're very bad at seeing long term and that kind of and being patient and thinking, like we get really excited and then it's like, oh, it's not doing everything that we want it to do. Like, therefore, we must completely abandon it, right? Like, what's the next shiny thing? And maybe that is what's happening with AI. It doesn't mean there might still be a bubble bursting, right? Because maybe trillions of dollars invested in LLMs is not the right thing, but if we also course correct and start thinking about kind of the world models or causal AI or whatever we want to call it, systems to thinking AI, right? And kind of AI that really understands us and doesn't make those really basic mistakes, that's also a great thing.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to that idea that we first started talking about. This was, it doesn't really know what it's doing. It doesn't realize that it's killing the fictional CEO, or letting him suffocate in a in a vacuum, right? It
Mhm.
doesn't realize it's doing bad things. And maybe we do need to get to the idea of, like, hey, we made a mistake here. We need to go back and kind of figure this out. And that leads me kind of this next idea, and this is one that I've got a big problem with. And it's the idea that, I don't know that it's an idea. We know that critical thinking amongst our, and I'll say youth, amongst younger people, the statistics have already started to show that people are just, they're letting things think for them if they didn't think at all. Like, critical thinking is eroding in our society, whether it be because of They're not concerned with thinking critically, or they're just taking everything at face value. Like they're taking their social posts as face value, whatever they read on Instagram or Facebook. That must be the truth because I saw it here, right? And they've stopped thinking about, okay, does that make sense, right? And that's my biggest fear, that we stop thinking about,
Mm.
we can listen to all the hype, all the propaganda on the whole thing, but we stop thinking critically about, okay, is that really true?
I'm really jaded on this. I think we've all stopped critically thinking a long time ago. Um,
Yeah, I will give you that, but I'm going to say the acceleration of it
yes.
seems to be,
Um, and it's and I think it's AI plays a role in it. But it's also, social media where we get information from. All of that kind of stuff is, regardless of your like political affiliation, I think it's rife on all sides, right? Is
mhm.
we've kind of stopped thinking, really analyzing what we're seeing and thinking, is this true or is someone feeding us a narrative?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think political orientation is a poor place to start when you start to think of thinking patterns. I
But we
really
do
do.
it, right?
But
Like
we
we
do it
really do it.
because it's prevalent, right? It's the thing that's right in front of us. It's in front of us probably 75% of our day, especially if we're looking at our whatever, our news feed, our social feed, everything that comes across has some sort of political bias in it. And you don't even know it anymore, as they have developed algorithms that basically say, oh, I see you like this, so I'm going to just feed you more of it.
Yeah. Yeah, we all have like our personal constructed reality. And I think that's why, I mean, we're kind of departing from the AI conversation, but I think it's one of the kind of side effects of AI is we're then not able as a society to have a conversation about what's important to us because we just don't know the reality of the other people, right? Because we all live in echo chambers to such an extent that you can't argue because there is no like base source of truth of like, this is what we're going for, like, this is good or this is bad, because everyone gets fed a different thing. What I really like doing is um and maybe this is interesting for some people is I go on my friends feeds on like Instagram or TikTok and I just see what they're being served, and I find that so interesting. Like politically, like my friends are generally aligned, but especially seeing like what guys get served versus women, like you see the division and where it's being sold completely. And then it's no wonder that we can't have a conversation about like why there's a dating crisis and all of those other things, right? Like we're just being pitched against each other.
And this is the thing that, again, if you start to think about these jobs that, AI would somehow begin to do, if it takes example from the way that we behave now, imagine how poorly
That's a horrible
those
example.
it becomes executed in such a poor manner that it's just replicating, the poor behaviors of what we currently have. And those are the things that I concern myself with, I guess, when I think about it, and the things that worry me, kind of keep me up or thinking at night about. Because again, like I said, I use AI, you use AI, we use it to try to help ourselves, be a bit more productive, and those types of things. But I think you had a great post on your Substack. The comment that you said was like, "Hey, might be a good idea. Don't just take the first thing you get back as actual. Go check it in 3 different locations, and that will give you a very, very good view of exactly how each one of these may be trained, or how it's totally turning the information around." I think it's such a great point.
Yeah, and three locations that you don't agree with, right? That are kind of different to what you would normally do. And yeah, we're not very good with like being uncomfortable and not seeing like things that we don't agree with, right? So you have to go out of your way to do it. And I think, yeah, not just politics. I think we're probably being served. Like I've had this with my boyfriend when we've argued. We've both gone to ChatGPT, and it tells us both that we're right and correct.
Right. It's your biggest supporter, and it supports
Yeah,
both sides. Yeah. It's Switzerland. You know what I
this is
mean?
true. I am correct, and obviously he is wrong. That's so funny.
Right. No, I get it. So I think that's the problem. I see that a lot on people's posts where they're talking about, especially ChatGPT is terrible at it. Oh, yes, you're right. Absolutely. And then you should say this, this, and this, or you should look at it this way. It's not really giving you any kind of, it doesn't have an objective point of view. It's like that friend that you have that you can't really stand because it's like it agrees with everything you say, and you're just like, "Ah, would you please stop?" He's like a parrot, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I
It's
was
terrible.
talking to someone today, and he was saying if ChatGPT was an actual colleague at your work and they agreed with everything you said, always wanted to like get more of your time, right? And then, but also made really basic mistakes all of the time, we
Yeah.
wouldn't keep them.
No, you wouldn't keep them at all. You would absolutely fire them within the first 3 weeks of them being there,
Yeah.
right?
Or you look at them as like a recent graduate, right? Like that, I think that is the best way to look at ChatGPT. Is it like you tell it what to do, and you say, go and research this problem. No, but then you check the research as you would with a grad, right? Like you don't just take their word for it. And then you say, okay, now based on this research, what are your conclusions? But you critically have to think about the conclusions and be like, okay, has it missed anything? Is there something else that they hasn't done? Same as with the grad, because you don't expect them to provide, like to know all the context and nuance and things like that. They can do the grunt work, but you're the one who's got the experience. So maybe like that kind of reframe has really helped me, and I really use it when I do my research and writing is I kind of dig and dig and dig and dig and dig until I know in my head kind of what I have a level of confidence of like, okay, this is like with data centers now. I've been digging and digging. I still don't fully understand it, so I'm not going to write about it, right? I'm not just going to have ChatGPT write some kind of post that I'm not 100% confident that it's correct. Once I have that confidence, I will then tell it and be like, look, this is the post I want to write, and this is how it goes. Point one, point two, point three, point, I don't know, 17, right? This is the thing, this is the nuance. It gives me the post, and then I go, okay, this is not correct. I like this, change that. And then I think it's a great tool because it does save me a ton of time kind of writing out all the sentences and putting all together, but in no way does it have autonomy
Yeah.
in kind
And I think that's the worry or the concern of many, I'll say maybe even executives, leadership people who have a recognition of what this thing is, right? They have a recognition of, hey, this is at best, from construction terms, at best this is a project engineer, kind of brand new to the job, or even an intern at the office, kind of brand new to the job. You give them a set of instructions to go out and go do something, and then you go check their work, right? And then you train again. They have to learn from said mistakes, right? And you wonder, especially if you're talking about if it's like a large language model, you wonder if that training is ever really kind of kicking in, because imagine the amount of prompts in a large language model is getting a lot from a lot of other people. There's a lot of just terrible information out there, and then it's reaching back out there and grabbing terrible information again. And so you're constantly having to monitor this new employee or this new tool, this new function. And that in itself is kind of a whipping, even though it can be very, very smart and can come up and do some amazing things very quickly. But you still have to be a part of it. And then it goes back to our whole idea of then I have let's say a project engineer or somebody that's new to the business come in and say, well, I don't really have much experience, but I've got ChatGPT or I've got Anthropic where I can just look it up. I remember my kids saying that, it's like, I don't need to know that stuff. Like coming back from school, like, I don't need to know that stuff. I could just look it up on my phone. I was like, well, what happens when the batteries die? You know what I mean? Or you're out of cell service.
Can I disagree with that? Because I
Yeah.
remember
Yeah. You
when
could
I was
disagree.
growing up, So I grew up in the age of like, well, Google really became big, right? And I had exactly the same conversation where I was like, well, I can just Google it, right? And the adults in the room would be like, yeah, but what if like the internet goes down, or like you need to know how to do like mental arithmetic, because what if the calculator on your phone is dead? Like you can't just rely on everything, and like you don't store any information, like you just think you can Google your way through, but you can. Right. And actually, the internet, if it goes down, there's like a ton of engineers like being woken up from whatever time in the night it might be to get it back working. Um, and so I think there's a reframe of like maybe as someone, and I agree with what you're saying as well, right? Like you can't fully rely on like LLM to give you all the answers. I agree with your fear. But I think younger generations have a way of accepting things and learning things, and it's just another tool, and maybe we don't fully know how we use it. But I don't think anyone's afraid of Googling things anymore, right? Like that fear's gone away. So we just need to figure out what is that thing with AI that we can rely on, but and what is it that we need to always bear in mind that like we still know and think about.
No, I get that. And it's like, you know, as an engineering degree, I used a calculator, right? I didn't use a slide rule. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I,
Yeah.
I get it. And I've never used a slide rule ever since, even though I learned how to use one. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like the abacus, right? Like we don't really use abacuses anymore, but if you know how they work, I guess that's probably a good deal, or maybe even know what they are.
I did a lot of my calculus when I was at university, like by hand. And has it helped me? I don't think so. I've never done it again.
Yeah,
I don't remember any of the formulas. I'm
you
I don't know.
yeah, you hear that story a lot. You hear that story of like, I'm really did a lot of things in college, kind of by hand or
Mhm.
whatever, and never ever used it again. Did it help? Yeah. Did it hurt?
It
No,
didn't hurt.
it
It
didn't
did no
hurt.
harm,
Yeah,
but I don't know if like knowing the most ancient way of doing things is good, right? Like we don't go to work on a horse or a camel or whatever, right? Like
yeah,
there's no benefit to that. There's no moral high ground to um like resisting change or things like that. I think the if anything, that's what will kind of keep you behind and make, but you need to know where the edges are and kind of when not to over rely on it. That's the thing.
yeah. Well, and so what I think that leads to me is kind of my last thought on this whole thing, kind of something food for thought as we kind of take ourselves away from this, but um, it has to do with struggle. And I think a lot of times, and AI is one of those things where we tend to not know what real struggle is. And so then we tend to get a bit reckless with maybe some of our invention, right? And I think maybe AI is something like that. It is supposed to help in so many areas, but I think we've gotten so used to the conveniences and creating more conveniences and so many comforts
Mm.
that we have forgot the benefit of struggle. And you got to have that. And there's a tipping point that I think we may soon reach where we find ourselves maybe out of a job or doing something, where we didn't struggle with something long enough to maybe to make ourselves better because we thought something was just going to help us along the way. And I get concerned with that because I do think, and construction tells me this every day, there is still an area where AI is never going to be able to go into, at least anywhere in the near, 5 to 10 years, where you've got to get underneath that house and fix that plumbing. You've got to dig that hole and you've got to put in that rebar, and that thing is 60 feet deep, and there's a lot of yards of concrete to pour in there. So there is that struggle that still has to exist, and there's a hard existence out there that we've got to we have to recognize that not everybody is going to be in this world of AI, um, and that transitionary period is going to be very, very tough on a lot of people. Um, as much as we're trying to create conveniences, we still need to understand we got to find that balance with the struggle.
Yeah, I think you're so right in this. Like, we are so reliant on conveniences, right? Like, if the temperature of the house is like a tiny bit off, it can feel like it's a major thing. And it's like we used to live in caves, right? Like, there was no
Yeah,
temperature
it wasn't.
control.
Look, I grew up when I didn't have air conditioning in our house till I was like 7, 8 years old. So,
In Texas.
and yeah, well, it's actually in Indiana, but even here in Texas, I know there's people. There are
Yeah.
friends of mine that didn't have, they were born here in Texas, didn't have air conditioning. And that was it. But that's not that long ago.
It's not that long ago. I think there's a real, I don't know what it is about struggle, and I also don't want to glorify like struggling too much or like really kind of, like making other people miserable. Um, but we learn something through struggle. It teaches us like the value of wanting something and working for it. And like, I'm trying to build a company now, and I have so much respect for entrepreneurs because it is so hard. Like, people tell you, oh yeah, now you can just like vibe code and do something in a day. But before you can do it in a day, you then need to research something that you've never done before. Then you find out like, oh, how to do it, like, and it's just everything takes so much longer. Um, so yeah, I think struggle is great.
Yeah, large lessons learned. And I think that's one of the things I can say to kind of, as we're wrapping up our conversation here about this. I think that's one thing that we all need to take away from it. And I don't care what business you're in. I don't care if you're in the construction business, if you're in the technology business, if you're in writing, if you're a writer, whatever you're trying to do. You have to embrace a bit of that struggle and realize that um, AI may not necessarily be the solution to all your problems, right? And so we can't take that first shiny thing, to your point, and just keep kind of moving on that. What we have to do is we have to take the lessons that we've learned in our struggle to make a better incremental path to improvement, because that's exactly what it is. It's struggle creates that incremental path that actually cements in those lessons learned, right? I don't know anybody that's ever won right off the bat and learned anything, you know. It's always those folks that failed and lose and then they get back up and they try again. You've got to have that, and you've got to maintain that balance. And I think in the world of the upcoming age, or in the age of AI, we have to understand that there are things that we do not need this for, and we should just leave it alone.
Yeah, yeah. I 100% agree, especially in industries like construction, but there's others as well, right? Not everything needs AI. And also, yeah, no one's gonna go and build the building for you. Like, that's still gonna have to be humans for the
Hmm.
foreseeable.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the same thing goes for, again, I think finance definitely is one of those things that we need humans for. We need a human interaction. It's already complex. We don't, we need somebody that can truly have that human connection, especially when you're talking about your banking, your finances, those types of things. I think it's a terrible idea
Yeah,
to,
especially considering we can't audit what the AI tool is doing, right? So we can't trust some of those big decisions to something where we don't know how it's made them.
well, Alex, I really appreciate your time today. You've given a lot of insight on, kind of the other side, the blind spots of AI, and just enjoy the conversation about it. And I think, as I summarize it, it's not that we're trying to, say AI, please stop. What we're trying to say maybe a little bit is AI, please, let's slow down. Let's think about this just for a second and make
Let's
sure.
think about it. Yeah, let's figure out how we use it well.
All right, very good. Well, I want to give everybody an opportunity. What is your Substack called again? Because I want folks to go out and read your stuff.
Called the long signal.
The Long Signal. All right. Well, if you are a Substack reader, and I would recommend going out subscribing to The Long Signal. And of course, Alex is on LinkedIn, so I'll probably leave her LinkedIn. You can connect with her on LinkedIn. I think that's a great place to start. But man, thank you so much for taking the time with me
Thanks for
today.
having me. It was great. It was so much fun.
All right. Well, listen, everybody in the ConTech Exec world, a lot of episodes here. I know this was a bit of a departure from maybe my normal construction talk, but I thought it was important that we get the other side of AI and they just different points of view and get some folks in here that we can talk to that about. And I hope you guys enjoy this one. But until next time, y'all be safe out there and we'll see you.